John, you mentioned the hydration. Is there any way to figure out if they're well hydrated or not? Like, how do you deal with that? Or specifically with teenage girls?
So the question is certainly one that is a tricky one. I ask. Sometimes I get the truth, sometimes I won't. But the reality is based on certain symptoms they may have, I'll know. But I'm always going with the fact that they're probably underhydrated. Knowing that the standard is half your body weight in ounces a day, I try to get them to at least understand when you're exercising, you got to add more on top of it. And if they say they drink one water bottle, I'm going to take a wild guess they're wildly underhydrated. So I usually ask, and I can usually get something out of that. And then I just tell them to make sure they steadily take it throughout the day. So not just all at once.
I guess my take on that question, go ahead.
We can repeat it. Well, the question is just water for hydration?
No, I'll take it. Okay, so first of all, a really easy thing is what color was your pee? If your pee's dark, you're dehydrated. It needs to be very light yellow, almost clear. That's a real simple thing to see if you're dehydrated. It depends. Like very light lemon yellow. Not his yellow, that's too yellow. Lighter than that, so you can look in the toilet and think, did they really pee or not? That's how much. That's how clear it should be to know that they're normally hydrated. As far as whether or not you need to not use water or other sources, it's very much dependent on the environment in which it is. Volleyball is typically indoor unless it's an outdoor, so it's usually hotter and more humid, and so they're not going to be able to. They're going to more likely to get dehydrated because they can't evaporate their sweat. They can't cool as effectively, and all that plays into it. So they may want to have some kind of a fluid replacement, but I would dilute it because it's too much of a load on their stomach, and it's going to either make them get sick or it's not going to assimilate well. So I would usually dilute it, or tell them, have some salt, put some salt on your meal, and you're going to get that, most of your electrolytes back.
So my take on that is more of a physical therapy post-surgery kind of thing. I had a patient who fractured her tibia and her fibula bone, and her husband is a judge, and her husband has never cooked a meal a day in his life, and he didn't know how to take care of it. So he was getting her all these different things from all these different restaurants and all these different stuff that she really never had before. And she wasn't healing all that well. So a theory that I had kind of goes with this: if your athletes or your patients are eating totally different food than they're used to, and then they go after surgery and they have brand new foods, or a tournament and they're trying different foods that they've never had before, I'm not sure their body is going to be well adapted for that. I'm not a nutritionist, I'm just seeing what I've seen post-surgically. The second thing is how they're doing, how their tank is before their tournament, before their practice. I think somebody mentioned that if their tank is filled with good stuff on a Thursday, on a Friday, they're probably going to be okay on a Saturday. If they come into that thing empty, you can't make it up. You just kind of survive at that point. So the bigger, the better the nutritional needs prior to it. Question? You good? All right. For exercise physiologists, anybody else who wants to partake in this question, how do you balance aerobic cardio stuff versus anaerobic, more jumping explosive, for oxygen uptake in the Krebs cycle management for the volleyball athlete? Dr. Anderson, you want to start on this one? I'm just kidding.
He's like, don't ask me that question.
So you have to understand that you're using all three energy systems pretty much all the time anyway. There's three energy systems. And my students know this. I talk about it as three cars. You've got a NASCAR, a Corvette, and a Prius. So the race starts, all the cars start. So the tournament or the game starts, they're using all three energy systems. They're going to rely more on the NASCAR during the game, unless they're resting, then they may be on the Prius and maybe a little bit the Corvette. But in the transitions, it might be the Corvette. So it's not that you need to really balance that. They're always going to use all three energy systems. They're just going to rely on one more depending on what they're doing. So if you're going to run a marathon, you're relying on the Prius. 50-meter sprint, you're going to rely on the NASCAR. 400-meter sprint, you're going to rely on the Corvette. Or if you go do interval training, you're going to rely on all three depending on where you are in that interval work rest cycle.
I think, yeah. So Nora describes it as 3 cars. I describe it as 3 engines, and one's revving, 2 are idling while you're in your sport. Volleyball is very much an interval sport, right? While you're playing, you're stop and go, stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. So interval training translates to that really well. But you have to train in all 3 different time domains to optimally develop all 3 of those bioenergy pathways.
You don't have to respond to every question. I'm not going to answer that.
I agree. What else do you really say?
I just wanted to have the Krebs cycle on there because I learned that in biochemistry
But we
class.
call it this TCA cycle now.
And see how bad I am? I don't even know what it is anymore.
No, they still
The
say
TCA.
Krebs
And the TCA is what?
tricarboxylic
The
acid.
tricarboxylic acid cycle. Just tell your kids that's what you learn. If nothing else, you got the tab. Yeah.